Don't let this filmmaking process that seems oftentimes so one way, so singular, tell you that you are disposable because there's somebody else that can do exactly what you can do. It's just not true. It's not true. Only you can tell your story. You know what I mean? Your vision is determined by the story that you have. I always say to young filmmakers, like, do you want to be hungry now or hungry later?
This is not a competition. Don't let anybody tell you that it's not a sport. we're not playing a sport. This is life. It's not a game, you know.
The only advice I can offer to any filmmaker, image maker, artist is that having knowledge of self, knowing who you are and where you come from is the most important tool you have. It's more important than the camera. It's more important than the script. It's more important than the sound design. It's more important than the editing, because all of those elements are informed by your accent. So before you invest in the camera, before you invest in writing the script, ask yourself real serious questions about who you are and the stories that you want to tell. If you don't see yourself in the story, if the story is not a reflection of a world that you want to create, it's probably not a story worth telling. That's just me. That's just my own bias in terms of why I feel like filmmaking is an important art form, why it's an important expression, because it gives us another ability, like music, like painting, like sculpture, to shroud and give the world an interpretation of the world, the future, the world, an imagination of a world that we want. And so I think I think knowing who you are, where you come from, is the most important thing. And before you go write a rival, tell a story about your grandmother, tell a story about your father, tell a story about your ancestors. Those are the stories we tell first. And then films like Arrival have a different meaning. You can bring more purpose to those films because you connect. For me, as I was making Arrival with Denis, I was thinking about my children. I was thinking about the mortality of my children. I was thinking about my own mortality. You know what I mean? And then when I was thinking about those things, I was concerned about Denis' children. I was concerned about Denis' children's mortality. And so those things don't come. You have to live life. You have to be seasoned in life in order to, I think, come to a realization of those things in your art form. And I think the way you become seasoned in your art form, the way you come partially realized, not fully realized, partially realized in your art form, is when you are honest with who you are and you are relentless with your own accent and your own vision in your art, in your storytelling, art making process. And so I would hope that when people see my work, what they see is an attempt to take everyday, sort of subdue, mundane human experiences in storytelling, in film, and help my ability or my attempt to help turn them into extraordinary moments. And so it's not just a woman putting on her coat in the morning, it's actually an experience, and there's actually intention in how we light that and how we see that. So it's not just a woman putting on her coat, but it's a woman putting on layers and layers and layers of backstories that got her to that point in the film. And so, something like Mother of George, I think, is the best expression of it, where it wasn't just about textiles or wardrobe that looked good. It was about the story behind that. And, a wedding is a wedding, but it couldn't just be that wedding sequence. It couldn't just be a wedding sequence. It had to be more than that. It had to be, in that film, we wanted you to experience a wedding sequence like you hadn't experienced a wedding sequence before. And so whether we succeeded in doing that or not isn't the point. It's the attempt to try to make those moments have great intention. Great intentionality is what I hope people see in my work. Yeah, I love book lights. So. And again, every film has this rule, right? Ain't the Body Saints, no fluorescents, no HMIs, only tungsten. So all the rules, just only use tungsten. So that film, we were using 5K soft lights, 2K soft lights, bounced to unbleached muds, back through half grid, full grid. Arrival was interesting because there wasn't much bounce light at all. There weren't many book lights. It was pretty much in Louise's house, all available light. When we did light, it was in the room, but it was very much out of the way. If we had to give a little shape in the room, we'd have something just right over the window carrying whatever was happening outside. But in general, it was pretty much all available light. And then when you get into the tents, all those practicals you saw hanging from the ceiling, those crazy, weird fluorescents, those were all LEDs, and that's how we lit the scene. Sometimes we would turn them up. They were straps, so I could either turn it up towards the ceiling and the ceiling was white, bounce it for. If it was a fixture you didn't see in the frame and I wanted something more pleasant on the face, we would bounce the ones that you didn't see in the frame, so you had softer light coming back. And then all the wide shots, we'd leave everything down because you have nicer pools of light. With the speed of our lenses, you can get a lot with very little. You watch the blocking of a scene. You see where things are happening, and then you and the production designer, art director, set deck, you decide, okay, let's put a practical here, let's put a practical here, let's put a practical here. And, because of the other scenes in the film that have the same sort of tenor, you accept the fact that if the person's looking at the lamp, they'll be frontlit, and if I want to move around the person 360 degrees, it's okay that they're completely backlit because we've seen where the source is coming from. And I've been really blessed because I've been able to shoot films in that way where filmmakers aren't worried when I come around from another angle. If they're completely in silhouette with a little bit of edge, they still feel like we're delivering, we're giving the audience what they need in terms of communicating whatever needs to be communicated at the moment. And it gives it a lot of visual texture. And so, between film or, with our incredible digital cameras that are out now, we can do that more seamless. We can do that without a lot of lighting setups, without a lot of, okay, we're looking this direction, all right, we gotta bring these lights in, we turn around, we gotta bring in some new lights. No, the lights are all there, we're just turning stuff off, So that's generally like the blessing of being able to use practicals is that, listen, as soon as you show the audience where the light's coming from, as soon as you tell yourself where the light's coming from, then you can jump around and take all types of liberties. And the more you jump around in those environments, for me, the more beautiful, because then you start to have a scene you're telling a story through lighting, texture, the use of light and shadow. And then sometimes, that doesn't always work out, right? Sometimes you don't have enough, and so you need to bring in other sources. Generally, our rule is, any wall you don't see, put black on it. So first thing I do when I go in a room is I black the ceiling. First thing I do, black the ceiling. That's gonna give you better shape. So it's not always nice to have all this return on the face. I like stuff to be have a little bit more attitude, even though it's soft, And then, if it's blacking the floor or blacking a wall you don't see, you could just be able to shape the light much more. So yeah, that's sort of like how we use practicals. We actually build. We look at what it is we like, and we try to mimic that and create those sources with those actual lights. And you put them on stands, you can lower them, you can bring them in, you can arm it in, you can do whatever you want. We did a lot of that.
The advice I would have to young cinematographers is that this is not a competition. Don't let anybody tell you that it's not a sport. We're not playing a sport. This is life. It's not a game, And take every opportunity to do your best. And don't be distracted nor persuaded by somebody else's opinion of what is and what isn't. You're the only person that can determine what is and what isn't, And you're responsible for every frame you create, And so you're the person that has to live and die by the frames that you generated. So I think the only way that we can feel comfortable about what we're doing is if we true to ourselves and true to who we are. And it's what Muhammad Ali used to say is, I'm not going to be who you want me to be, I'm going to be who I want to be. And I think that's what cinematographers got to say. I think every cinematographer got to say that I'm willing to lose a career off this particular frame. I'm willing to never work again because I believe that this frame is so important to create. This image is so important to create that if it takes food off my table, it's okay. Because this is the connection I believe we have to the art form. If we're just there to shoot, make some money and go home, then whatever. I don't have nothing to tell you. You know what I mean? Because I don't even know it. I don't know what that's like. For me, every image is the beginning and the end for me. And so that's why you always have to, if you really love what you're doing, you have to be prepared to give it all, in spite of all the obstacles,
I think the best director for a cinematographer is a director that's interested in curating their filmmaking process all the way down to the people that they hire. The best director will say, I've given you a story, and I know your work and I know your work and respect your work as a cinematographer. I've watched all the films. I've studied them visually. I've also studied them as pieces of storytelling. And I see what you're interested in, and I can actually talk to you about it in what I see. You know, we can have a conversation about if I'm on target or not. But I have studied your work, and I realize that you are the only person that can actually bring that quality to this story. And I'm asking you to come participate with me in the process because I know you can bring something unique. Now, the next film will have a totally different literary impact, and you won't be right for it. But for this one, this is you have to shoot this film. That I feel like is what good directors do. I'll say first and foremost, I'm growing to be a lot more communicative, a lot more articulate about why a shot would feel different from here versus here, and why I think it's better to put the camera there. So I feel like I'm growing because of the great directors, the wonderful directors that I've had an opportunity and have been blessed to work with. They have taught me how to be a better communicator. They've taught me how to really get down to the business of telling stories through images versus being a technocrat. Like, they don't care about the lenses or the lighting at the moment. They just want to know why the camera's better feeling wise here versus here, you know? And so I have to be able to communicate why it's important for the camera to be there. Ultimately, in my opinion, is the opinion for the story, because I'm only telling you to put the camera there because I believe the story needs it, not because I just want to put the camera there. That's the beginning stage of the process. And the director may say, I like it there. Let's start there, but let's also try it here. Where I think it's important to have the camera here because the story is, this moment needs to be shot from this angle because there are gonna be some other things happening off in here in this part of the set that we need to see, whatever the logic is. And so when I was younger, making films, I didn't always like that because you wanted your idea to be your idea and you want that to stay. But I've definitely haven't worked with, and I'm working with directors who are stronger than me as directors than I am as a cinematographer, and so I'm always learning. I'm always redefining my practice.
Those art forms where you cannot put your hand on it. You can't touch the screen and feel anything. You can't feel anything by putting your hand on the screen, but what you can feel is this invisible relationship between what we're seeing on the screen and the way our bodies respond to it. That in a lot of ways makes us have to work extra hard to create atmosphere within film so that feeling, that experience is really, really intense because we don't have the sort of we're not able to put our hands on our material. We create the material and it's projected on a one-dimensional surface, but we can't rub our hands across it. We can't actually put our hands on it. And so we have great responsibility, I think, to create atmosphere, to create vibe and create energy within the art form so that we can bring a more heightened experience, a more heightened sense of feeling to watching movies. Read a script and figure out where I am in the story. And once I figure out where I am in the story, it actually helps to inform how I can help bring atmosphere to the story. So, my grandmother's house in Chicago, Illinois used to have a particular sort of atmosphere, right? You walk in, you smell a particular smell. There was a particular sort of palpable energy in the room in terms of heat. She had a very hot house, These are things you feel. These are energy. This is the vibe you can feel. And if I went into her house today, even though she wouldn't be there, or if I went to somebody else's house, if I smell a similar smell from my grandmother's house, it actually transports me back to her house. And it doesn't even matter where I am. I could be in somebody's house in Spain and smell that smell and be instantly transported into my grandmother's house. And so, I think all I can do is read the script and figure out where in the story is my grandmother's house. Where in that moment in the script can I actually bring some of the things I can remember within my subconscious to sort of the visual landscape. And I think the feeling one gets out of that sort of atmosphere is universal.
I've got all these lenses laid out in front of me, and I'll start with one lens. And I know what size I want. Let's just say roughly I want the close-up to be what they would call a bust. Put the lens on it. If I'm too wide, I'll start to move the camera in. And when I find the image itself is the exact expression of what size that I want, I then go and stand on the outside from behind the camera, and I look at how far is the lens from the subject. And if it's this far away, it's not the right lens, right? So that means probably that longer lenses don't really work for me anymore, because I'm more interested in getting closer and closer and closer and closer and closer. So to me, it brings a certain truthfulness to it. When I watch films that are doing that, I respect the filmmaking more. When I'm watching films where the camera's like halfway across the street, but you still have that same size, I don't have the same connection. I feel like we're too conscious of making film. I'm trying to find ways to create a more personable experience for everybody. And I feel like the more the crew can squeeze in around character, around subject, and create a blanket, create a community around talent, then the process is more legitimate to me. For other image makers, they feel fine, with longer lenses. But for me, I've grown to not. Years ago, I watched Roger Deakins give an example of why this wasn't a close-up for him, but that was a close-up for him. And it was just like, then it didn't make sense, but now it makes so much sense to me, Just the way I was taught was like, you never shoot somebody with a 14 millimeter lens that close to their face. But, obviously Chivo has reinvented that for us.
I kind of got into this as a venture in community building, So my requirement is that, after we go through the war, that I can break bread with you at my table with my kids and my wife, So for me, I try to give a lot of benefit of the doubt with the literature, because sometimes the literature is as sewn up as tight. So I'm hoping that the director is going to bring a lot of his or her own temperament, accent, perspective to the thing we're about to wrap our minds around. So,
what do you mean by community building?
My entryway into a lot of things is music, especially jazz. So I always thought that filmmaking would be as collaborative as that, as free as that, as an experiment, And so I was looking for opportunity to sort of freely associate myself with other artists who are interested in a certain particular result, but really more interested in the process of coming up with the result. And so the community building thing comes out of the desire to collaborate, but at the end of the day, I know this may sound lame, but I want to be your friend. You know what I mean? Like, I want to be your comrade. I want to be somebody that I carry on a relationship with. If I'm going to be that vulnerable and that open to you, it can't just be thank you. It was a great time working with you and go the opposite direction. Like, so much of my meta now and I've left so much of my DNA out on the table that I want to make sure that the person that sweeps it up and sends me away is a comrade, is a friend. The challenge was like, when I'm totally clueless and I don't know what the hell is going on, and I look at you and I say, I don't know what's going on. You know what I mean? Can I trust that? You'll say, no problem, man. Let's hand it off to somebody else. So that was a big, again, being vulnerable and being able to be honest and saying that, I don't know, I'm not sure if I trust this. I'm not sure if this is actually working. I'm not sure this is the way we should do it, or this is the way we would do it if it wasn't a heavily visual effects environment. I knew that, I felt like that Denis would be supportive in that sense, and he was. He knew that I had no visual effects. I never even shot a blue screen really before that. So to know that I would have a support in that way was really important for me.
Maybe one of the last things I say to y'all, the young filmmakers who are listening, and is, don't let this filmmaking process that seems oftentimes so one way, so singular, tell you that you are disposable because there's somebody else that can do exactly what you can do. It's just not true. It's not true. Only you can tell your story. You know what I mean? Your vision is determined by the story that you have. The way you see light and shadow is determined by the story you have, and that your story is unlike anybody else's. So it's all about finding a safe space for you to tell your story. That's really what this filmmaking process is about. And, honestly, I just feel real guarded about saying this, about how that makes a contribution to literally the amount of food we put in our mouth. But I think the idea of the starving artist is a ridiculous notion. I don't really support that. But I do think that, I always say to young filmmakers, do you want to be hungry now or hungry later? And you know what I mean? Sometimes in order to secure your lack of starvation later, you have to be a little bit hungry now. And the hunger cannot drive you to make irrational decisions. To make decisions you don't want to make. The hunger should allow you to also access the most powerful word you have in your process, which is the word no. No. You know what I mean? No, I will not do that. You saying it to somebody else, or you saying it to yourself? More importantly, saying it to yourself, that I will not do that film because that does not stand up to the things that I want to say in my body of work. And That may mean you're gonna shoot less films, but that's what it is. You know, that may mean less money right now, less whatever right now. You don't got the fancy sneakers, or you can't go to End and get you a nice shirt. You got all that. That's okay, because at the end of the day,
it will come.
It will come. It will come.
Yeah.
Take my journey as a embodiment of that. Like, don't look at where I am now. Where I am now is 20 years. I've been doing this since I was 17 years old. 20 plus years, 25 years. Look at my journey as like 20 something years of like 20 years of not eating at all. That's, you know what I mean? It's only been in the last few years. Track the films. The films tell you the journey, right? Track the films. It's only been the last few years that I've been able to like have a certain level of not financial comfort per se, but comfort in the fact that I can say no now, not face a whole earthquake of repercussions. Like, it's really important for me to let the world know that I'm not just generally accessible because I'm hungry and thirsty and want to make. I want to make sure that it's the right thing. And so it's a rocky road, you know what I mean? There's very few slots, but I believe that everybody has a slot, and your slot is guaranteed when you are in tune with your lineage and your story.